So, what if I told you you don't have to sit alone in grief anymore? This is Natasha Smith, and you are listening to the Can You Just Sit With Me podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Can You Just Sit With Me podcast. I'm your host, Natasha Smith, speaker, podcaster, grief advocate, and author of my new book, Can You Just Sit With Me? Healthy Grieving for the Losses of Life. My book, Can You Just Sit With Me, is a reflection on what it means to grieve and how to cling to hope even in our darkest moments. Instead of providing quick fix solutions, this book creates space for us to take time to just sit and grieve, learn, and heal in healthy ways. And you can grab a copy for yourself or a friend at imnatashasmith.com or wherever books are sold. Today, we have the beautiful opportunity of sitting with Theo Boyd, author of Your Grief Is Not Like Mine. She is a speaker, author, and influencer who has found solace in writing and believes there's a need to talk about the hidden emotions accompanying grief. She writes so that others may seek comfort in her words. So let's join the conversation. So I am just so super excited, Theo, just to kind of jump right in this conversation with you today. So just tell us about a moment when you wanted to ask the question, can you just sit with me?
It would probably have been about a week after my mom's accident. And I just felt like people are kind of scurrying all around. Everybody's like bringing food, got to do this, got to do that. And I just think looking back, you know, sitting and just being present with somebody is the most valuable thing that you can do, especially for a freshly grieving person.
In the face of grief or the rawness of fresh loss, the power of presence serves as a beacon of peace and strength. Simply being there, offering undivided attention and empathetic silence, can provide profound comfort to those in pain. In the darkness, the warmth of a comforting presence shines light on the path toward healing, reminding us that we are not sitting alone in our sorrow. So now I just want to if you can just take us back and just share your story, how it has come to inform the theme of your book. My grief is not like yours. So just tell us your story.
Well, they were telling me initially, I had some people say, in the advertising world, you need to condense your book into just one sentence so that when people, it's an elevator pitch, right?
Right.
And I just said, that's impossible. I can't condense my book into that one sentence. So July 29th, 2019, I got a phone call that my mom had been in an accident on our family farm. When I got there, we were peanut farmers in north central Texas, which is about an hour south of Dallas. When I got there, I learned that my father had accidentally run over my mother with one of the farm tractors, and they would have been married 50 years. So rather than going from celebrating their 50th and planning for that celebration, we had to start planning for a funeral.
Wow.
And a few months after that, I got my dad in some complicated grief counseling with me and one of my dearest counselors and friends over 18 years. And we got through that successfully. And it was such a heaven sent that we got that counseling that we very much needed. And then she died suddenly, February of 2020, the next year. So there's another, loss that was pretty
Yeah.
great because my dad had finally found a confidant in his grief.
Yep.
And he was really enjoying that relationship with that counselor. And we all know, those of you out there, if you've got a great counselor, they're priceless, right?
Yeah.
And then a few months after that, I learned that my husband had been having an affair. So then as that tried to work itself out, we ended up in a divorce, which is another type of grief, just a completely different type of loss. And I lost that companion at home that you bounce things off of. I lost that confidant that I thought I had. And then the last chapter of the book, so to speak, is Father's Day of 2022. I went to check on Daddy that morning with breakfast and surprise him, and I found that he had taken his life. So all of those losses, every time a new loss happened in that rapid fire way, I had to rewrite what I was writing. And initially, I didn't plan on writing a book. I was
Mm.
just journaling because
Right.
that's what I taught my students to do. I was a creative writing teacher, and I had taught them to just put it out on the page. And that's what I was doing. And one of my girlfriends walked by my desk and she said, "Oh my gosh, you have to write a book." She'd read a couple of lines. So I started realizing maybe my healing is going to help other people that, I kept feeling unheard in my grief.
Yeah.
So I just knew there has to be millions of others that are feeling this way if I'm feeling this way, which is, Natasha, probably why you wrote your book.
Mhm.
You felt like nobody would just calm down and just sit with you and be present in that moment.
Yeah.
So that's my story. It's in the book, and we put some self-help questions in there for people so that, and I want to be clear about this. The title of my book was not so that everybody would read about my grief. It was so that once people got the book, they could own that title for themselves, probably the exact same way you feel. You're not asking everybody to sit with you. You're letting people get that book and own that title for themselves. And
Mhm.
that's why you've got all those things in your book that's so similar to mine about the healing, the practices and the self help so that people can own that title for themselves.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your story. So much loss, so many devastating things that have taken place in your life, and I loved finding out that you were a teacher, a creative writing teacher, and that you taught your students this great practice that they're going to be able to take with them throughout their lifetime, really of learning how to get to deal with heavy things and heavy emotions by writing it on a page. Like, I literally learned that in my like, a few years ago. Like, I knew about journaling and stuff like that, and I guess I never thought about, how healing it could be. And
It is
so
so, isn't it
mhm,
great? And I would tell my students the first 5 or 10 minutes, come in the classroom, and I taught 10th grade. So that's that real hard age there where they haven't have their driver's license yet, and they're feeling kind of awkward in high school,
mhm,
sophomores.
yeah,
And I would just say, get out a piece of paper, write down everything that you're thinking about, and then come up here and shred it, and then we'll start class.
mm,
Because my kids had there were a lot of fatherless homes,
yeah,
there were a lot of just troubled teens. And I just learned by watching them. They would, I'd have a few that would be like, I don't feel like writing. And then when they'd see their friends writing, they just start writing something down. And I said, I don't care what you write. It can be a curse word. It can be, I don't care. I'm not going to look at it. And I would see that healing in real time.
mm,
They'd write it, they'd go shred it. They're like, she's not going to read this. She's not going to grade it. Nobody's going to see it.
yeah,
Shred it. And then all of a sudden, it's like a recess for elementary students. You can
mm.
teach better after they've gotten that out.
That's so amazing. I love that so much, and I'm hoping everyone who is listening to this, like, really grabs a hold of this, the grief needs somewhere to go. It needs a place to go, and so this is just an amazing, just, um easy way to do so, that doesn't cost anything. Just grab
Mhm.
your sheet of paper. So I love that. I love that you share about that.
Yeah. Now back to that journaling thing. I actually feel sorry for the piece of paper.
Right. It's getting shredded, burned, or something. But it's
Holding
it's
all
so
that heavy weight.
oh, I know, it's so true. But it's so healing and it's so helpful. So I love that you share that. I wanted to just talk about this quote that's going to kind of segue us into this next thing that I want to talk about. And so you wrote this, and it says, "Learning to live through loss is a skill that may take years to master, but you will come out on the other side, understanding your purpose and your path, and there is hope on the other side." So tell us what it looked like for you to learn to live through loss.
Hopeless. It was hopeless. And I tell people all the time, I'm a preacher's daughter. My daddy was in the pulpit. And every memory I have is him behind the pulpit. And everywhere we'd go, my dad was witnessing to people. And he was a non denominational Bible preacher, and I played the piano. So every Sunday, and he was the song leader too.
Oh,
So, I hear him in my head singing hymns. I hear him whistling. He was a great whistler. And I hear him all the time. But back to your question, after my mom's accident, I heard him say words that I never dreamed in a million years would come out of his mouth. And those really never stopped over the 3 years until his death. And I learned from my counselor that we do not need to shy away from
yeah,
allowing those grieving individuals to say the words they need to say.
yeah,
Sure, don't go in a room full of kindergartners or Sunday morning church service and start doing it, but let them in their own room, let them say the words that carry the weight of their pain. And those are the words he had to say. So hearing that from my dad, who it was Jesus Christ and then daddy, that was
yeah.
the chain of command. And hearing that come out of his mouth was
Yeah,
very hard for this preacher's daughter. And I'm
yeah.
going to tell you, I lost my faith.
Oh, yeah,
I figured, well, if daddy doesn't believe in God anymore and God allowed this to happen to a man that's only served him his entire life, there must not be a God. I let it go, the faith. But guess what? It didn't let me go.
oof, yeah,
It didn't let me go. And Satan thought he had my dad. Daddy had been a target for all these years
yeah, I'm
because
sure.
he wants to take my daddy down, because my daddy brought so many, and look how many he's still bringing to
Yes,
to God.
amen. Yes,
And guess what? God had my dad the whole time.
yeah,
So Satan may think that he's won this by taking my daddy in the way that happened. And I know that my daddy is in heaven. And I
yeah,
know that my daddy did what he did, knowing that's where he was going to be and be
yeah,
with my mom. So I did lose my faith back to me. And everything that kept happening, and that's my second book that I'm working on, all these things that kept happening in my life as all these losses happened, the signs from my mom and dad, the
mm,
signs from God that I was on a different path. So I always say this: there are the two most important days in your life are the day that you were born
yeah,
and the day that you know why you were born.
mhm,
And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, Natasha, that I was born to write this book,
yeah,
to write their love story and to use their testimony, even in their death now, to help other people. So, as much as I wanted to lose my faith, and I talked a good game.
yeah,
I was like, I don't believe you, God. You're not there for me. I'm mad at you, and I said some of the words my dad said in private to God.
yeah,
As much as I wanted to just give up, and I'm sure you've been there.
mhm,
I've read the first 3 quarters of your book, and
yeah,
I know some horrible loss for you. And we just want to throw in the towel, don't we?
yeah,
We're just, because we're sinners, and we're just
yeah,
like, that's it. It's hopeless.
yeah,
But God kept showing back up. And
mhm,
isn't that amazing when you see the hand of God working in your life
yes,
and in his time? And after my dad, I said, I can't even finish this book. I was 2 weeks away from a deadline, and it was almost finished. And my dad knew I'd been working on a grief book. And I didn't really want him to read it because it had so much detail of my mom's accident and my feelings. And I didn't really want to share all that with him and hurt him even more. So I was real torn on how that was going to happen. And then my dad dies. And I realized mama never did anything without daddy. And daddy never did anything without mama. And daddy just wanted to be with her in that book. And I told my publisher I'm not gonna be able to finish. And then do you know what happened about 2 weeks later? I got my pen out and I started writing, and I got my laptop and started typing, and I got them back on a Zoom, the publisher, and said, guess what? I'm almost finished. And daddy played perfectly into the book. I was
yeah,
able to put him in the chapters in such a perfect way. And his chapter that talks about his death is actually, and the part of my dad is chapter 7. And 7 biblically
yeah,
means completion and perfection.
yeah,
And we didn't even plan it that way. So that's just another sign from God.
yeah,
I I just
ugh,
can't. You can't. You know what? Talk a good game. And
yes,
Christians out there, go ahead. Say you're going to get rid of it and you're not going to believe it, but it will come back. He will
mhm,
hold you the whole time.
yes, Such an amazing, amazing story. I'm so excited about your second book. But even those who are listening, you have to grab the first book first. And it's amazing and it's inspiring. And I love, like, it was so funny because you just finished talking about just words that you typically won't let out. And so when I got to the chapter that dropped the F bomb at the chapter title, I was like, oh my gosh. But it's so good to, for those who are walking along this road, to say it is okay. It is absolutely okay. Christian, non-Christian, whoever you are, let it out, the words that need to come out. So I love that you just touched on that and how you unfolded that, because um, those who are listening need to know that it is okay. And it is, and it is a way of lament, to be honest, that
You're
that
right.
is, get out the complaints, get out, like, God, how could you? You let it all out,
My
because
publisher did not want that title.
I'm
That
sure.
my publisher said, you're going to turn away people. Um, I said, have you read the chapter? And
Right.
they said no. And I said, you have to read the chapter and know why I cannot change that title. And sure, it has excluded me from, I love to enter book contests,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
has excluded me from a few because you can't have explicit language.
Mm.
But I didn't write it for that. I
Right,
wrote
right.
it so that the people out there would not think that I'm this like holier than thou,
Yes.
perfect person. I'm a preacher's daughter. I grew up in church on the first row, the first pew. My mom pinched me if I acted up. I
Yes.
I did Bible memory association, where the BMA, where you have to say the
Mhm.
verses. I taught Sunday school, and I wanted those people out there to know it's okay. My dad, this Christian rock, this rock of God, this phenomenal character that brought so many to Jesus, he is cursing God. So that's our sin nature. That's what's
That's
going to
okay.
happen. So I wanted to keep that word in there. And then I kind of tried to soften it a little later on with the chapter about more F words, because those are the good F words in
Yeah,
that chapter 11, the good ones like faith, family, friends,
yeah.
fun, and foundation.
Yeah, it's absolutely, I love it. It's shocking, but it's in the best way, though. It's in the best way. And I mean, and just talking about cursing God, I mean, Job, we're not the only ones. And that's the thing. Sometimes we feel like we are the only ones who feel this way, who are saying these things, who, we feel a little otherworldly, like, am I still a Christian? Yeah, you're still a Christian. This
Yes.
is normal. This is what happens. This is okay. And so we have to bring the Bible into these conversations to say, this also happened in the Bible, guys. It's
Yes.
okay.
That's what I love about your book, is all the you've got consistent scripture to back up what you're saying, and that's what I really appreciated in your book. I didn't bring in a lot of scripture except Romans 8:28,
Mhm.
and I'll tell you that story real quick.
Yeah.
So that was my dad's favorite verse. He always said I can't say a favorite verse because they all are, And his Bible, he's got all these little meticulous tiny notes. And anyway, after my dad's accident, my cousin's a minister, and he'd preached my mom's funeral, and he was going to preach daddy's, and he got there the morning of my dad's suicide.
Mm.
And I walked past, and I say that all this in the book, I play it out. I walked past my dad's desk, which you have to walk past to get to the bedroom. And I just grabbed his Bible. And my cousin told me, David told me, this is what I did. I just grabbed my dad's Bible and turned around and shoved it into his chest. And I said, Romans 8:28, Romans 8:28, Romans 8:28. You have to preach daddy's funeral with that verse. Well,
Mm.
he didn't think much about it at the time, but as the week went on preparing for the funeral, he told me later, and he told the congregation he was having a really hard time wrapping a funeral sermon around Romans 8:28, which is all things
Yeah.
work together for good, because
Mm.
what good can be out of this man, that this wonderful person that killed himself? And do you know, after that service, so many people came up to David and said, I will never look at Romans 8:28 the same. It has changed what is in my mind about Romans 8:28. Sometimes the all things that when God says all things, he means all things.
Yeah.
And it may not be all good things work together for good.
Right.
But I see now, and my sister called me about 2 weeks after the funeral. She said, it just dawned on me that maybe those things in Romans 8:28, it's your book, helping other people,
Yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
So all things work together for good. And this whole story of my parents wouldn't have been complete had it not ended the way that it did. Now, would I take it all back and
Right.
wish? Of course. I
Yeah.
mean, the sacrifice is insane. But knowing how many people are doing so much better in their grief now, are coming to Christ, that is the fuel. And you know this too.
Yeah. That is absolutely true. It's absolutely true. I couldn't have said it better. I mean, it's absolutely true. We know, just so many scriptures, he'll make all things beautiful in its time. And in the grips of grief, you're like, what? Like, how is this even possible? But if we
Yes.
allow to open up ourselves, open our hands and our heart to say, God, what is this? He'll show us. And as you're saying, as you said, and as you're writing in your next book, he shows us.
Yeah, we can talk that good game and be like, no,
Yeah,
I'm not a Christian anymore. I gave up on
right.
God. But he's going to bring his children back to him.
Yes, amen. Yes, amen. Oh, so beautiful. I wanted to kind of continue along that vein of learning to live through loss because it is a learning. I love how you just kind of coined that, learning. So, can you tell us just some things that you've discovered about grief? Like, some things that you've learned?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is friends. You're going to find out who your true friends are. And that's unfortunate in a way because you see a side of people in grief. You know, grief tends to it filters, it's a heavy filter. And what's left is, and Gail put it this way, my counselor was Gail, and I share several Gailisms in the book, her Pearls of Wisdom. But I told her what I was struggling with. And it wasn't only with my husband at that time, it was, and feeling betrayed. It was with some friends as well that I thought were friends. And she said, grief will separate the children from the adults.
Wow.
And that's a heavy statement, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Those of you that are in grief right now, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't have to explain that. Grief separates the children from the adults. And what I mean by that is the ones that can sit with you like your book, the ones that can be present with you, the ones that can go that extra mile for you because it's not easy. And that's why in my book, I try to address some things to help those that are helping a grieving individual. It's not just all about the grieving individual, but how do we help them? And so my friends got me through, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to find out who they are. And when you do, you better lean on them and they will be there to hold you up. My friends are called my fairy blonde mothers. And they magically appear anytime that something bad happens. They magically appear in my life. I may not see them for several months at a time,
Yeah.
but then when something bad happens, there they are. And funny story, after my dad's suicide that morning, and they had taken his body, and I was still at his house with all the emergency people and all the funeral, people are there.
Yeah.
People in the community start showing up at the house, and I am outside, and it's a hot June day. Well, here comes this little, I want to call it the coach that's bringing the fairy blonde mothers in. And I'm telling you, these women are flamboyant. They are the big blonde. They own a little dress shop in Waxahachie, Texas, and they also own funeral homes.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it
Okay.
is. It is so crazy. One of them owns, her husband owns they own a funeral home in one big town. The other one, she owns several funeral homes. So these ladies know death,
Yeah.
but they show up, and little Charlotte gets out, and she's just this blonde, tiny little petite. She gets out of the back of their little, I don't remember, it's like a really nice SUV. And she gets out of the back and she goes, Theo, you just can't make this shit up.
Really? Oh my
and
gosh.
sorry if I cussed on your podcast, but it's in the book because she was trying to lighten the mood,
Yeah.
and they knew what needed to be done,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they start going through Daddy's house and pulling these pictures off the wall for the funeral, and they set up this gorgeous funeral for my dad, and they stuffed, I think, 600 bags of burlap bags of peanuts for my dad's funeral because he was a peanut farmer, and so they
Yeah.
gave away goodie bags at my dad's funeral, and everybody got these little peanuts. And
Oh my
I
goodness.
heard from people for months later that they just enjoyed those peanuts so much, and they just made the funeral home just look like it was such a beautiful tribute to my dad.
Yeah.
And they did what I never asked them to do. So
Wow.
lean on those friends. They're
Yeah.
going to get you through, and that's the first thing. And journaling, that gets you through. And just not expecting anything of yourself. Be kind and gentle to yourself. And I never understood what Gail meant when she first told me that in my grief counseling. But she said, be kind to yourself. And she even said it in a very gentle way. Be gentle with yourself. And I didn't know what she meant. Go to have a spa day. What's she talking about? Go get a massage? No. I like to say, give yourself grace in your grief.
Yeah.
It's okay if you don't make all the recipes at Christmas that your mom always made. It's okay that you don't attend all the parties. It's okay that you can't do with the things that you always did. Give yourself grace. And I have to practice and exercise that every day, Natasha, because
Yeah.
I put so many like requirements on myself. And I've got to just step back and think, wait a minute. I'm 51 years old. I'll be 52 in April. Am I doing right now what I'm supposed to be doing? And then I have to remind myself to pray about it
Yeah.
and let God help me with that grace in my grief.
Yes. Absolutely. I love that so much. Both so very, very important, and and I think as grievers, it's hard to practice the giving ourselves grace, the grace that we extend to others. Even it's hard to give it to ourselves. So it is amazing to me, and how hard it seems to be. And so, but that's how it's awesome that we have each other and we have communities to kind of remind us, okay, give yourself grace.
Yeah, so the learning
Mhm.
to live is a daily struggle.
Yes.
And at first, I had a one liner and a quote that was like, learning to live will take a lifetime to master. And then I was like, whoa, if I say that, then people are not going to realize that they can learn to live in their lifetime.
Yes.
You don't have to take your whole lifetime to learn
Right.
it. So I changed it, and it's, excuse me, learning to live is a process or it may take years, but you will. And there is hope. So those
Mhm.
little lights of hope, I didn't even I didn't even remember the word hope
Mm.
until a friend of mine had me on the phone, and I had told her that I went and did this thing and it was fun and I had fun and I laughed, and she said,
Oh,
Theo, that's hope.
yes.
And I realized hope. I never really even thought of that word, but hope is the desire and the willing and the looking for the word. It's the going forward. It's the looking forward to something, and it's the anticipation of something. And I'm so hopeful now because I've got the ability, and I've got my health, and I'm able to write.
Mhm.
And a lot of people out there, they're not even able to write, or they're not able to see the page,
Right.
or like my mother who was deaf,
Yeah.
she never complained, not one day in her life. And of all people who could have complained about something, it would have been her. As Daddy said, she got a double whammy. She was a peanut farmer's wife and a preacher's wife. So she could have complained a lot, and she was profoundly deaf,
Yeah.
but she never complained, not once. And so that's the example I was given. And I'm
Mhm.
so thankful because I realize that's how I'm able to do what I'm doing now, is because of my upbringing and the
Yeah.
foundation I was given and those strong characters. And people that didn't have that as a child wouldn't be able to handle anything like this. So the fact that you and myself were able to write it down so that those people that wouldn't be able to handle it might be able to handle it.
Mm.
Boy, isn't that a gift that we've been given?
That is a gift. That is a gift. I love the way you put that. It's so true. It's so true. I'm gonna I have another quote from your book, and that'll kind of close us out. Like I'll kind of say the quote and then I have like a follow-up question. So it says, "You are never alone. Even in your darkest moments, God is using something within that darkness to help you." So can you tell us about some of those dark moments, which we heard your story, and just kind of tell us how God helped you through them?
This is actually a funny one. I was at my dad's funeral. We were in the family room, and my dad was always the leader of everything. He was the 6'4" preacher. When daddy got there, everybody was like, "Whew, Joe Bob's here. It's going to be okay." And mama always said, "Boy, people can't wait for your daddy to get here." My daddy knew how to preach. He knew how to lead. He was just a leader. He was a natural born leader. So he was gone. And we're in the family room. And it wasn't like when mama died, daddy was still being strong, even in mama's funeral room,
Yeah.
her family room. So it was me. I felt like it was me. And there was probably about 25 of us. So before we walked out into the family area for sitting for the funeral, I turned around and I looked at everybody and I said, "Okay, we have to be strong," because this is what daddy had told us at mama's. He said, "We have to control our emotions." And he had always talked about this, how as a minister, he had to control some emotions so that he could get the message across. I
Mhm.
said, "We need to control ourselves so that these people, we can know that we're thankful that they're here, and so that this service can go successfully. We're going to all control our emotions, and we're going to be there and give this final tribute to daddy." And everybody's, yes, we go out, we sit in the pews, and I'm in the front row, my daughter, my sister, my nephews. First song they play is Daddy's Hands, right? Which
Oh,
my sister and I chose, Holly Dunn, Daddy's
yeah.
Hands.
Yeah.
I lost it, Natasha. I
Oh.
started bawling. I mean, you could hear me on the back of the at the back of the funeral home. I lost it. But guess what? I look over at my daughter. She's 25. She is in her final semester of law school right now in Houston, Texas.
Mm.
This wonderful first granddaughter of my parents, first grandchild,
Yeah.
and they helped me raise her. There's no doubt. She grew up on the farm. She looks over at me and she goes, "Mom, you've got to get it together." And I realized she's right. I'm about to get up and speak because I
Okay.
spoke and I've
Yeah.
got to get it together. So
Yeah.
in that darkness, in that time where I thought all hope was lost in daddy's hands, and there's my daddy laying in the casket and I'm just lamenting and crying, I get up and I delivered probably the best speech of my life.
Mm.
I didn't miss a lick. And everybody just said how amazing it was and how they enjoyed it so much. I spoke for 20 minutes
Wow.
telling old stories of
Yeah.
daddy and his testimony for Christ. And I realized it was in that dark moment that God let me get it all out.
Mhm.
He knew I needed to get it out so that I could go up to that pulpit like daddy did and tell the stories of daddy that only I could tell. So it was in that dark moment that light and hope came through in the faces of everybody out in that congregation.
Wow, that just gave me chills. That is so, so, so powerful. So powerful. So powerful. Oh, this has been such an awesome time. I was thinking, as I was going through your book, I was like, this could be like 7, 8 segments because it's so much.
Well, let's
Um,
just meet again for the
I kn
divorce, and then we can meet again for the
I
farm life.
know. Yeah. But it's just, I'm so thankful and so grateful for your story and for you telling your story and, just spreading just, the truth in about grief, the realities about grief, yet the hope that we can still have. So I'm just so grateful for you for doing that and doing it so well because I
I'm
see,
so I'm so thankful for you, Natasha, and just having that communities that we have and share on Facebook, and how we're able to kind of bounce things off of each other. And when I read your book, I see so many
yeah.
similarities in mine, and I'm very thankful for you.
Yes, thank you so much. So again, just thank you so much for being here and for sitting with us today and just for sharing about your story, your book, and your heart. Let us know, where can we find you at, and how can we get your book?
Well, of course, my Facebook, I try to be on there every day and keep up with all my people on there. But my website is thinktheo.com. It's ThinkTheo, thinktheo.com. And you can go, we have a link to Amazon there to buy the book. You can buy it on the website and I'll actually sign it and mail it to you. Or you can just go to Amazon. I think it is actually on sale right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Theo. This has been an amazing time. Looking forward to just continuing to connect with you online.
Yes, thank you so much. It was finally so good to meet you.
Yay, same here. That brings me to the end of this episode. Thanks again for joining me, and thanks for listening to Can You Just Sit With Me? If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and be sure to come back for my next episode of Can You Just Sit With Me? Until then, this is Natasha Smith, helping you to find hope in grief, hope in the hard place, and hope in the challenging times of life. Be sure to connect with me across social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at I'm Natasha Smith.